Okay, let me start. I've buried a secret that's gnawed at me and has become unbearable. Where do I start with the emotions and events that led to this confession? Perhaps from the quiet beginning of a night that changed my life forever. I remember it was a Tuesday. Tuesdays are usually unremarkable, a slog until the weekend. This Tuesday was not. The day was a mad scramble of work and domestic duties, typical for a 40-year-old mom. The evening ushered in a tenuous peace. There was a peaceful calm after the fighting of the day, and a quiet, expectant air filled the house. My bedroom, once a haven, now felt like a remote outpost. The pale blue walls were sometimes overwhelming, making the emptiness blatantly obvious beside my bed. Daniel came home late. I heard his key in the lock and his backpack drop to the floor. A warmth spread in my chest, sharpened by years of mothering. He spoke tiredly, his voice devoid of sparkle. "Mom, I'm home." Those few words were a reassuring anchor, reminding me of our steady bond amid the turmoil. I discovered him in the kitchen, leaning over the counter, tired. Dark rings under his eyes, and he had a pale complexion under the fluorescent lighting. "Daniel, you look exhausted," I told him, worried. He gave a faint smile. "Tell me about it, Mom. Work was nuts. Then my study group ran longer than it needed to." He rubbed his neck, an old habit from childhood, where a skinned knee or bad grade yielded the same fatigue. Maternal instinct kicked in, a deeply ingrained program. "Come on," I said, leading him into the living room. "Forget that bag. You need to unwind. Have you eaten anything?" He shook his head. "Only a coffee." My heart went out to him. He was 22 and at the threshold of manhood, but at that moment, seeing him so tired, he felt his little boy once more, needing to be consoled. "Let me get you something light. Then, why not rest?" I had allowed the suggestion to escape, ingenuous and careless. But as I said it, something within me moved. Something different from maternal concern. We sat in the living room, where shadows played across the walls in the faint light of the sinking sun. He fell onto the couch, exhaling a relieved, tired breath. I served him a quick sandwich, my mind drifting to the possibility of his sleeping in my bedroom. It didn't make sense. His bedroom was downstairs, down the hall, but the thought lingered, a seed of something odd. It might have been my motherly nature wishing to have him close so he could rest or something more. I brought him a sandwich and juice and set them on the coffee table. He barely touched them, his eyelids were dropping. "Mom," he drowsily muttered, "I'm just so tired." "I know, honey," I whispered, my hand above his hair. He looked up, his eyes heavy but searching for a moment. Something switched in that instant, a little spark of electricity. It was gone right away, filled in by tired familiarity. But the why seed had been planted. "Come on," I urged stubbornly. "Get into bed with me." I led him, not to his room, but to mine. The blue room, my solitary haven. It was where he would unwind, in my motherly care. Or so I had hoped. We lie to ourselves. Quite easily, don't we? Especially when hearts speak to us of things minds reject. This is where it started, my friend. The start of a journey down a road that wasn't mine. One that led me to a night I'll continue to relive with shame, confusion, and a strange kind of gentleness. It began in my blue bedroom, where my weary son sought comfort, and a mother's heart teetered on the brink of the forbidden. The blue room, normally quiet, was different from Daniel's. Larger yet cozier, the air thick with unspoken words. He moved like a child who needed comforting, and I behaved like a mother tending to her son. While he lay on my bed, the thought rang in my mind. I drew back the covers. The flowered duvet, chosen for its calming effect, was too bright for the emotion stirring in me. He was dressed in work clothes and a faded t-shirt. It was oddly reassuring to see him so normal, but I could sense how strange he had become and how much he had changed. The child who had once taken sanctuary in my arms now lay on my bed as a young man, his tall limbs and chiseled features crafted by the hand of time. It was a jolting reminder of time's insistent march and the imperceptible changes in our bond. I pulled the duvet over him, and I felt a warmth seep through me. Maternal warmth, I told myself. But my hand lingered for a moment on his shoulder. His t-shirt was soft, and I could feel the strength of his young muscles beneath it. A different heat ran through me, one that was not maternal, one that was linked to something taboo and alluring. He panted, his eyes closing. His thick eyelashes stood out against his pale cheeks. Things I had never seen became clear and defined. His slow, gentle breathing filled the silent room, which was in contrast to my racing heartbeat. I stood there staring at him, a statue of mixed feelings. The soft light of the bedside lamp created gentle shadows on his face, highlighting his jaw and light stubble. He was beautiful. The word came to me unanticipated in its forthrightness. I had planned to sit beside him for a bit to ensure that he was asleep and comfortable. I did so. I sat on the edge of the bed, not wishing to wake him, my muscles tense. The bed dipped inward, and I was too near. His warmth enveloped me, a captivating heat. The air was heavy with unresolved tension. Time dragged, each second taking an eternity. The only sounds were his soft breathing and my pounding heart. I looked at his face, the outline of his mouth, and the rise and fall of his chest under the duvet. He was so close, within reach. The urge to touch him and stroke his hair was overwhelming. It was a primal pull, a magnetic force drawing me toward, a boundary I knew intuitively I shouldn't cross. My hand found its way to his face on its own. My fingertips gently caressed his cheek. His skin was warm and soft. I had a shivery shock from the touch. He stirred beneath me, muttering, and my heart raced. I stood, paralyzed for a moment, hand hovering in the air, fearing he would wake and what I would reveal. He returned to sleep, his breathing growing stronger. Relief washed over me, weak and quivering, but it was soon followed by disappointment. Disappointment that he had not stirred or that the moment had not progressed. It was an obscene and monstrous thought. And yet it lingered in my mind. I pulled my hand away, cradling it against my chest to calm the frantic pounding of my heart. What was happening? This was my child, exhausted and hungry, in need of solace. And I was here on the brink of betrayal, insanity. The air in the room was heavy, suffocating. The silence was heavy with unspoken wants. Beneath the flower-patterned duvet and gentle bedside light of my blue bedroom, a seed of danger was planted. Confused by my emotions, I could see how deeply it might take hold. His warmth, soft flesh, and closeness wove a web of forbidden desire and unnerving gentleness. Shamefully, I couldn't tear myself away. Not yet. The silence was heavy and strained, not the cozy sort. It vibrated with unsaid feelings, growing tighter with every passing moment. I perched on the bed's edge, a statue of torn longing, gazing at Daniel as he slept. The rhythmic rise and fall of his chest, his gentle breathing, comforted and tortured, incessantly reminding us of him and the forbidden ground we unknowingly tread. My mind was a battlefield of conflicting maternal instincts and unwanted desires. One voice yelled, "He's your son. He needs comfort. You're his mother." But another, gentler voice whispered, "He's a man now. Look at him, touch him, feel the warmth." The contrast blinded me, tearing me apart. I was Margrethe, the mother, but also a woman who had been denied intimacy and affection for far too long. In that quiet moment in my blue room, those parts of my being collided with one another, creating a volatile mix. The air was filled with awkwardness. A gentle stirring, almost imperceptible, brought a creeping feeling of unease into the accustomed stillness. Perhaps it is my agitation or Daniel's subconscious awareness of changing dynamics, even in slumber. The atmosphere shifted from casual to one that was tense and uncomfortably intimate. He moved slowly, waking on purpose. His thick lids slowly parted, revealing glazed eyes. After he blinked several times, he focused and met my gaze. We looked at each other for a very long moment. His sleepy eyes were filled with confusion and something else that I could not quite pinpoint, making my heart beat more rapidly. The silence intensified, growing uncomfortable. The unsaid hung heavy over us. He moved slightly, dispelling the aura of closeness. A spark of awareness lit in his eyes, sensing the strange circumstance. He cleared his throat, an unusual sound in the quiet room. "Mom?" he mumbled, his sleep heavy, voice with a questioning lilt. What are you doing here?" The straightforward question landed in the tense air like a lightning bolt. What am I doing here? The question echoed in my mind, mocking, accusatory. What was I doing? On the edge of my bed, I watched my son sleep, my hand over his shoulder. My mind struggled to think of something that would dispel the awkwardness and resume normalcy. "Just making sure you were all right," I stammered, my voice fake and insincere. "You looked exhausted, so I thought I'd check in with you." He blinked, thinking over what I had said, brow furrowed. "Oh," he muttered, the sound heavy with unspoken questions. He sat up straight, pulling the duvet further up, a slight gesture of self-awareness that took me with shame or disappointment, or both. A strained little laugh broke out. "Well," he said, a stiff and trembling try at a joke, "I suppose I'm comfortable? Perhaps too much? Mom putting me to bed in her bedroom? Stranger, you say?" The word weird hovered, a lifeline drawing us back from the brink. He recognized the awkwardness, broke the spell with humor, and diffused tension with a self-deprecating laugh. Relief washed through me, nearly making me weak. He offered a reprieve from the suffocating nearness, and I seized it thankfully. "Weird." "Yeah," I laughed, trying to keep up with him. "Weird. Silly of me, just motherly instincts gone wild, I guess." He smiled sincerely, relaxing his pinched face. "Yeah, Mom," he replied, pronouncing Mom with an ache of familiarity and anchoring us in our bond. "You were always a little overprotective." And that broke the spell. The awkwardness lingered, but the charged intimacy had melted into the easy security of mother and son. But beneath it all, something had been moved within us, irretrievably. Our neighbor, Robert, arrived a couple of minutes later, complicating the tangled feelings and unexpressed desires brewing within the closeness of my blue bedroom. The tenuous normalcy, restored with anxious laughter, broken by the harsh ring of the doorbell. The ring cut through the tension, substituting it with a more biting one. Daniel and I were frozen, taken aback by the uninvited interruption. In the blue room, the world outside seemed intrusive, breaking into the tentative intimacy that had almost been achieved. Daniel frowned, gazing at the door, and then back at me, confused. "Were you expecting someone?" he questioned, still in a rigid tone. I shook my head, feeling a sinking sensation. "No," I whispered. "No one." The doorbell rang again, more loudly, insisting on attention. I groaned, bogged down in unspoken emotion and tension. "I'll get it," I grumbled, rising from the bed, my legs heavy and unconnected. As I moved towards the door, I felt Daniel's gaze on me, his impassive face a mixture of curiosity and something more that made me feel even more uncomfortable. I stepped into the hallway, leaving Daniel in the blue room in our moment. The feeling of impersonality and coldness lingered in the hallway, unlike the intimate bedroom. I turned around as I approached the front door. Daniel was seated on my bed, stiff and reflective, but also withdrawn. Suddenly, a fleeting feeling appeared in his eyes, taking me by surprise. Jealousy? Was it jealousy? Absurd and ridiculous, and yet the flicker was unmistakable. I shook my head at the whimsical thought as I opened the front door. Our neighbor Robert was standing on the porch, with a chagrined smile, holding a covered dish. "Hello, Margaret," he said with a smile, unaware of the tension in the house. "I cooked extra lasagna and figured you and Daniel would like some." Robert was a nice, innocent soul, but completely oblivious. He stirred things up with his arrival into the delicate balance that had developed between Daniel and me. His arrival, however, also helped to bring a halt to something far more dangerous. It disrupted our rhythm long enough that we did not continue on into forbidden territory. "Hello, Robert," I said with a forced smile, trying to be hospitable despite my distress. "Not interrupting at all, so thoughtful of you. Please, come in." I stepped back, opening the door further, aware of Daniel still listening in my bedroom. Robert entered, smiling widely, unaware of the tension. "Is Daniel home?" He glanced at the shut bedroom door. "Saw his car." "Yes, he is," I replied stiffly. "Just lying down after a long day." "Oh, work and school, huh?" Robert nodded sympathetically. "Tough? Perhaps I shouldn't disturb him." He stood there, lasagna pan raised, not sure. Then Daniel emerged from my bedroom, walking with an unnerving, fluid grace. He paused in the hallway, his eyes fixed on Robert with an inscrutable gaze. The previous awkwardness disappeared, replaced by a wary intensity. The electric atmosphere snapped with renewed tension. "Robert, hello," Daniel said, his voice quiet and observant. "What's up?" He focused completely on Robert, not even noticing me. The change in him was unnerving. The sleeping sun was gone, and in his place was a young man of quiet intensity. In his eyes, the locking of gazes with Robert, the clenching of his jaw, I saw it again: jealousy. This time, naked and directed at Robert, our friendly neighbor. Tension was palpable, a silent battleground of suppressed longing hidden behind polite exchanges. I was powerless to watch, breathless, as the equilibrium changed abruptly and uneasily. After Robert had left, insisting that he wasn't imposing and the lasagna was no big deal, a more suffocating silence fell. The previous lightheartedness vanished, to be substituted by a dense tension filled with unspoken words and unresolved emotions. Daniel and I were in the living room, divided by an unseen gulf, with the lasagna dish, the reminder of Robert's intrusion, uncomfortably on the coffee table between us. He didn't return to my room. He stood rigidly, eyes downcast, gazing out into the twilight growing dark. His silence now was different. It wasn't the comfortable silence of mutual understanding or the earlier awkwardness. This was a deliberate silence, a barrier to keep unspoken emotions from being verbalized and conceal the turbulent undertows of our relationship. I stared at him, my heart hurting in confusion that equaled the upheaval. What had just occurred? What was going on? Robert's arrival, Daniel's jealousy. It was a jumbled mess of emotions I couldn't decipher. Was the jealousy real, or had I projected my desires onto his reaction? Did my son, in that unsettling moment, actually feel jealous? The prospect was terrifying, but oddly thrilling. Silence filled the air, broken by the sound of far-off night traffic. We were silent and unmoving, frozen like statues in silent tension, the heaviness of the night pressing down upon us. I longed to break the silence surrounding the shift between us, yet the words were trapped. They were held at bay by fear. Fear of what I'd say, what he'd say, and shattering our fragile normalcy. Finally, Daniel stirred. He turned away from the window, eyes downcast, expression blank. "Thanks for, getting the lasagna," he muttered, voice low. It was a weak attempt at normalcy, and it simply helped to accentuate the tension it was meant to release. It was a weak try at normalcy, and it only served to highlight the tension it was intended to dissipate. "Of course," I whispered. "Robert's nice." Another unsuccessful attempt at normalcy, a hollow sentence that didn't bridge the gap. Was Robert just nice? Or had he become a threat to Daniel? The thought was both repulsive and sickeningly intriguing. He jerked a nod, not looking. At me. "Yeah?" he said curtly. "Nice?" He then awkwardly walked into his room. "I'm going to bed," he said, distant and muffled. "Early night." He disappeared down the hallway, and I was left sitting by myself in the living room with the plate of lasagna and heavy silence filled with unspoken words and tension. I remained there for some time, watching the empty hallway and hearing Daniel's far-off movements and the muted thud of his door. The silence became denser, now seasoned with deep loneliness. It was not my usual solitude, but a more piercing loneliness, knowing that something had permanently shifted between my son and me. The blue room, once my sanctuary, was now a battleground of forbidden desires and blurred lines. Robert, my friendly neighbor, had unwittingly sparked unresolved tension between us, ripe with the potential for something more, or something appallingly less. The lasagna remained untouched on the coffee table, a cold reminder of the awkward intrusion. I, Margaret, was alone in the vacant house, confessing this turmoil to you, my unseen confidant, burdened by guilt, confusion, and an undeniable glimmer of excitement. The expectation of the unspoken words, unresolved tension, and dangerous, rode ahead, lit by a faint light of forbidden desire. The night was young, as was the intricate story of me and Daniel. Thank you for listening to me. Did you like these infidelity stories? Drop a comment below if you want part 2. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for more cheating wife stories.